آزادی بیان
言论自由
free speech.
So I'll just start by defining what I take to be no platforming. No platforming is a strategy that asserts a prescribed person or organisation should not be given a platform to speak within a certain social space. In recent times, the use of this policy by left-wing student organisations to stop certain people from speaking at universities has come under fire for shutting down free speech. A recent prominent case has been Germaine Greer and the online campaign to stop her speaking at Cardiff University due to her transphobic hate speech. It's important to note, however, that this campaign was unsuccessful. So there are two standard strands in the argument against the use of no platforming. The first is ideological and the second is practical. Firstly, it's seen that there is an inherent value in free speech so that abhorrent ideas must be tolerated. And secondly, these ideas should and can be defeated in open debate. I'd like to problematise both these notions and argue that no platforming is a legitimate tool of activism. I want to question our received understanding of no platforming as fundamentally about the denial of free speech. So, clearly, we like free speech. Speech is good. There is clearly a value to free speech, that when ideas are out in the open, if they're wrong, they can be exposed as such, and if they're right, they can be strengthened through debate. That's the standard sort of argument in favour of free speech. We're not trying to deny that this is a dynamic at play. It definitely is. However, it's clearly not the only dynamic, and actually, this hypothetical free speech situation doesn't exist in real life. In the hypothetical ideal speech scenario, what we envisage is an ideal type arena where actors can communicate on an equal level non-violently. In other words, we imagine an arena outside of power relations. However, there is no speech outside of power. There is no neutral ground on which people can debate freely as purely rational, non-interested agents who can set their social position and embodiment aside. Taking the Greer case again, Greer did eventually give her lecture at Cardiff University. However, her prominent social standing meant that there were armed guards outside the venue for her protection and to stop protesters from entering. This is a clear example of the unequal power relations at play. Greer is given a platform to speak for an hour, which is an hour longer than any of her critics. She is given an armed guard, a privilege not afforded to the trans people whose lives she puts at risk. This is not a free speech scenario because the manipulations that have happened to allow Greer to speak is a mark of massive social capital that only a very, very few people have in our society. The odds are so twisted massively in Greer's favour. So, this brings us to the issue of why we'd want to stop Greer from speaking in the first place. Well, quite simply, her words take away the personhood of trans people. She literally denies the right for trans people to exist on their own terms. It should be clear that in a democratic society, speech can never be totally free, that your liberty exists contingent on your liberty not infringing on that of others. Our laws against defamation, libel, and hate speech attest to the limits that have to be placed on a fundamental freedom for society to function in a democratic manner. It has to be pointed out also that the right to free speech refers only to freedom from prosecution, so it doesn't give you the right to force your ideas onto others, and it doesn't give you the right to be listened to by anyone. In other words, the right to free speech is not equitable to the right to a platform. When a prominent figure says hateful and bigoted things and refuses to apologise or even entertain the possibility that she might be wrong, as in Greer's case, it is common sense that there should be consequences. Two things for me become evident from this. The first is that if the argument against no platforming runs on the basis that no platforming is a threat to freedom of speech, it should be noted that as a society, we believe that free speech should be tempered by the harm principle. In other words, the right to freedom from harm outweighs the freedom of speech. No platforming as a tool would thereby be legitimated if we believe that the harm caused by a potential speaker outweighs their right to speak. It is vital to note that our judgment of this, both of harm and of the threshold of harm that would require no platforming, is inherently political. Again, there is no neutral platform from which to judge this. We have to make a value judgment as to what we consider harmful and what we as a society deem that should be protected. Secondly, it needs to be made clear that no platforming is not foremost or only a free speech issue. No platforming is not an attempt to prevent these ideas from being stated, it is an attempt to prevent these ideas from gaining traction or being validated. This is important if we believe that the violation of free speech right constitutes no platforming as illegitimate. A platform is not a neutral position, it is an elevation. It is an invitation to be heard, implying that there is a value in what is said. A platform is inherently embedded within the power structures of institutions and invests the speaker with performative power. It is not and cannot be a politically neutral position, and who we choose to elevate speaks to who holds power and which ideas are powerful. This is clear when we look at no platforming in practice, which is always against people who lead the subordination of a group of oppressed people. You have a situation where people are subordinated, and you want to double the harm by providing their oppressors with a platform which provides them with more social capital. What I've tried to emphasize is that to fit the ideal epithet scenario of free speech onto an unfree world is damaging, because if you don't recognize the power inequalities at play, you will continue to replicate them. The freedom to dissent and offend the powerful is not of the same value or standing as the freedom to attack the disenfranchised and disempowered. When we want to no-platform fascists, such as Marine Le Pen, what we're trying to take away is her privilege to be racist in order that black, brown, and queer bodies can have the right to exist without violence. To frame this as an infringement of rights is completely disingenuous, because an analogy would be the attitude of some white people during the civil rights movement in America, where whites complained that if black people got more rights, this would encroach on their rights. It is therefore false to equate the loss of privilege as a harm. So I would then argue that no platforming can be seen as a democratic intervention in the power structures to enable those who are oppressed to greater say what kind of values that we as a society want to hold and to legitimate. Thank you.